In this section, we will be covering some of the functions listed on your screen. We will not have time to cover each one of them individually. You are encouraged to look at the DAX function reference online, supported and maintained by Microsoft, to further understand those functions that we will not cover in this section. That said, let's go ahead and look into the demo. Let's go ahead and open our Excel application and open a blank workbook. Heading into Power Pivot, choosing our connection. We choose it from the data service, and we choose our Northwind OData. Testing it, clicking OK, and the next button. We're going to choose the customers table and click Finish. Waiting for it to import, and it has completed. We click the Close button, and we have all our data successfully added into our data model. Notice what we have available here. We have countries, customers, contact name, contact title. What we're going to attempt to build is a customers table with a filter by country. To that effect, we need to go back into the workbook and add a pivot table. We choose our connection, click Open, and open in a new worksheet. We're going to call it Customers. Very well, now we have that added. So we want to add country as a slicer. We right-click on it and add it as a slicer. Going to move it to the right so that we have some real estate. And we're going to add our customer name, our contact name. There we go. Notice that it is available. We can filter through them. But we would like to add that filter so that we can group it. So let's go ahead down here and add the country into the rows. Scroll back and notice they are grouped by country. That's great. Everything else we want to do is to add more counts. We want to count how many customers IDs we have. So let's head back into our Power Pivot window. And let's add a count of how many rows we have. For that, you'll notice that we haven't used yet the ability to create calculated fields within our Power Pivot window as well. We can. We just head down to any of these columns, and these are either shown or hidden. The calculated area, notice that appears and disappears. Here's where we can add our calculated fields directly without having to go back and forth with it within Windows. So let's create a customers count column, calculated field, and it's going to contain the count rows, all the rows that we count for the customers table. Let's click on that. So far so good. We have no error, and it's giving us already 91 records. That's great. The other thing we want to do is an all-inclusive count. Why? Whenever you're using filters, whether it's slicers or the ones that are pertaining to the pivot table, you are removing those values from the row context. For this case, we want to be able to exclude that filter. And the way to do that is creating a calculated field that excludes that filter. Let's create a column, a calculated field called customers count, all customers count, and use once again the count rows, but in addition to the usual formula, we're going to add all and the table customers. Notice that it counts the same. Now let's go and switch into our workbook and add these recently created columns. Calculate field actually. Great. Notice that they're there. Now let's move our slicer a little bit more closer to the pivot table and filter by Argentina. Notice we have a customer's count of 3, which is correct, but it excluded the filter. And that's what we wanted to demonstrate. In case you ever need to exclude that filter, whether it's through slicer or the other means, you can by using all function. Let's head back into our Power Pivot window and add yet another calculated field. Let's call this one non-repeated customers. And what this will do is, by utilizing the distinct count, it's going to make sure that there are no duplicates in case there was a duplicate customer ID. So far so good, no errors. And I'm going to expand this column and we get 91, which is fine. It's telling us there are no repeated or duplicate customer IDs, which is great. So far so good. Next, let's think about how we want to apply relationships and how we could attempt to breach that concept, to learn it. Here we don't have any data that could be related. So that means we have to add. Let's go ahead and import from our OData service 2 more tables. Let's use the products, first the categories, and then scroll down for the products. These 2, if you're not familiar with them, are related by the category ID. We click the Finish button, and they will be added to our model, data model. Great, it's completed. Notice that there are existing here. Let's switch to our workbook, or actually stay in here, and let's find how we can relate these two. There is a function named related. So let's head down to our columns and create a column called, let's call it category name. And it is going to be using the related function. Notice that it pops up already a description indicating it returns a related value from another table, and that's great. So what we're looking for is from the categories table, category name. We enter. Okay, we missed something here, which is okay. Something is awry. Let's go ahead and just remove this. And notice we get an error. What are we missing here? If we think about it, the related calculation formula, DAX formula, is correct. But we're missing something. Let's look and see if we can get any error. Okay, it says either the column does not exist or it does not have any relationship. Let's go check and see if we have any relationships. Let's go to Design, click on any part of and Manage Relationships. Notice that we don't have, so it's correct. It has found an error in our logic. Let's click the Create and relate the products and categories tables. Notice that as soon as I click products, it already knows how to relate them. As soon as we did that, the error went away. It'll be much better once we properly name this column into category name. Great, so now we are able to relate data between tables in our data model. That's a really good step. One other thing we're thinking about here, what happens if we want to find out if there is a filter applied to our pivot? Let's go ahead and add a calculated field, name it appropriately. Country is filtered, so it is a calculated field, and we're going to use the isFiltered function here. We're going to tell it customers and the country. We're entering it, and so far no error. That's great. Let's go into our workbook and add this isFiltered. Should be somewhere around here. Let's filter around, move around. And we notice it's still not available. So just to ensure that we are adding it, let's go ahead and manage our calculated fields and check to see if we missed anything in here. Check the formula. It seems to be okay. We click OK and close it. Let's go back to our screen and see if we find it anywhere in here. We still don't. We'll switch into these and remove it from our existing relation. We'll delete it from the model. We'll go back and see if we can now fix any of these. Calculated field, it's no longer there, so let's recreate it. CF country is filtered. We copy and paste here, and we're going to start adding again the formula. Is filtered by customers country. Check the formula. It's added. Now we see it. And it's added. So let's scroll to the, move the slicer to the right. It's telling it that it is filtered. What if we remove the filter? Still telling us that there is some value added in here, that it's filtering everything. Let's check and see if that's true or not. We don't have anything. Let's filter it. Clear the filter. Everything is coming up as true. Great. We do have filters available, and it is matching to what we want it to be. What if we remove the filter? Let's click on the slicer. It's gone. Do we have any other filters in our pivot table? Let's go check. It doesn't seem like it. But if we add our country to the report filters, notice this changed immediately. It is not filtered anymore. Let's go ahead and re-add the slicer. It is filtered, and now it's not. So what happened here? First, the calculated field was not being properly identified within the Power Pivot window. Second, we fixed that by adding it in the calculated fields. We found the workaround, and it finally picked it up. Then we created this calculated field to help us identify what is the relationship and how we can determine if a filter has been applied to our data. That's it. It works properly. Whenever you filter, it tells us it is filtered. Whenever you clear it, it is not. How did we accomplish that? By using and adding it to the filters down here. Well, let's go back and add some rows in here that we want to count. Let's go back to our managed our pivot window, and we're going to create some new formulas here. We're going to use calculate CF count with calculate, and we're going to calculate count rows, customers of all customers. Notice it counted correctly. Let's head back to our window and see if it added it. It's still not appearing. Well, no worries. We can go and copy and paste whenever that happens. It shouldn't happen actually, but we're going to remove it from here. Delete it from our model and head back into calculated fields and add a new one. Going to add the values and remove the naming. Going to check the formula. It checks out. Add it as a number, no decimals, and comma just in case. Click OK. Now we have it appears. Let's move the slicer furthermore, probably too far, and notice that it's counting everything. That's great. What is the usefulness of calculate? Calculate is a very powerful function. It allows you to perform functions within functions. Think of it as a sum on steroids. You notice that we were able to tell it which table and tell it to count all of these with two functions. What if we want to count and add a filter? That's where calculate has tremendous functionality. So let's go add a new calculated field, call it CF count with calculate and filter. Let's choose entire, copy it, and here's where the formula gets interesting. We use calculate, we tell it count rows, as before, customers, comma, and now we can add a filter. Notice that it has a parameter for filter. We're going to add filter on customers by the column country where it's equal to USA. Let's check and see if formula is correct. We missed a parentheses, and now it is correct. Add the number, 0, and comma. It's working its magic. So what happens if we do filter by USA? Let's move downwards. First, it correctly indicates there is one row. This is where you have to remember about the filter and row context. So it's correctly indicating this one is actually filtered. If we do not filter and remove the filter, notice that it does not meet the requirement. So it's telling us there are no rows that meet that specific criteria. This gives us a good idea of what a good starting point with calculate, with count row, distinct count. All these formulas together can give you a lot of power to filter data that you have been provided with in your model.